Hi everyone, to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Fall is here and there's no better way to welcome fall with this pumpkin pecan bundt cake. It's moist, it's delicious, it has that pumpkin spice flavor that we love this time of the year, even though it's still high up in the 90s here in Houston where we are. But I'm in the mood for fall things and this is why I'm bringing this recipe to you. I know you're gonna love this. Let's get started. In my pan over here, I have 3 cups of pecans that need to be toasted. Toasting that's really intensifies their flavor. So my oven is preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm gonna toast the ovens for about 7 to 8 minutes. Then I'm gonna let them cool completely. Once they're cooled, then I'm just gonna chop them up using this little food processor. If you have a bigger food processor, you can do this all at once. You want them to get finely chopped. If you like bigger chunks in your cake, you can do a little bit of a coarser chop and then just put them in a bowl and set them aside. Now it's time to combine the dry ingredients. So in this bowl over here, I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour, 1.5 tablespoons of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. It's more like 2 teaspoons. I always go heavy on the cinnamon. I love the flavor. Half a teaspoon of ground ginger and 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves. I left out the salt even though it's in the recipe because I'm going to be using salted butter, so I'm not adding any salt. Otherwise, you can add half a teaspoon of salt to the dry ingredients and the zest of an orange. I don't have oranges, but I do have these clementines, so I'm just going to zest 2 of these and put them in here. Whisk everything all up and set it aside. Now it's time to beat the wet ingredients. So in my mixer, I'm going to add half a pound of butter that's really nice and soft. Again, this is salted butter. Here in the States where I live, the butter is not too salty, so this will work. And then I'm going to add 1 cup of granulated sugar and 1 cup of light brown sugar. Then I'm going to add a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract and get that going on a low speed until they begin to combine. Then I'm going to add half a cup of light olive oil. This is going to make the cake really nice and moist. Mix that all up until it's all combined. Then I'm going to add 4 eggs that are at room temperature. I'm going to try to add them 1 at a time until they're incorporated. Beat it on high so everything is nice and fluffy. Next, over here I have a can of cooked pumpkin puree. This is not pumpkin pie filling. That's completely different and you don't want to use that in this recipe. This is just cooked pumpkin that's easily found in your baking aisle of the supermarket. It's 15 ounces and I'm going to add that to the mixture and let it beat on low speed. And then I'm going to combine half a cup of milk with a teaspoon of baking soda, mix that all up and add that to my mixer and just mix it all up on low speed until it's all combined. Once that's all combined, I'm going to add the dry ingredients that have been whisked up a little bit at a time, but I'm going to reserve about 1/3 of the dry ingredients, leave it in the bowl, and I'm going to toss the chopped pecans in it so that way they're coated and they don't sink to the bottom of the cake. Then go ahead and add the pecans to it, mix it all up. Also, I like to go in once I'm done with a spatula just to make sure that everything is evenly combined. Mix that all up, and then I have some butter left over on the wrapper that I'm just going to grease my bundt pan. I love using bundt pans for this. It makes the cake really nice and moist. It's thick, it's beautiful, and it just comes out so nice. I also added a tablespoon of olive oil and I just brushed it really well to make sure that the cake releases easily. This is an older pan and I do need to order a new one. It's been well loved and it's kind of scratched up, so it is time for a new one, but it should work. I tested it in here and it released, so hopefully it'll do the same right now. Next, I'm going to transfer the mixture to the pan. If the pan is too full, this is a lot of batter, then you can just take some of the batter out and make cupcakes with it like I'm gonna do, but let's see how much it fills up. And I like to use an ice cream scoop for this to keep everything nice and neat. Okay, everything fit in here. I usually don't fill up my pans this much because a lot of times the cake rises too much and you end up losing some of the batter, but I tested it and it worked and I'm hoping it's gonna work again today. Otherwise, you can definitely make about probably 2-3 cupcakes if you take some of this batter out and just fill it 3/4 of the way up. Tap the pan so everything can settle. And I always bake onto a baking tray so that way if anything spills, it spills onto the tray and not in my oven. So now we're going to bake the cake. My oven is preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. I bake this at a lower temperature because it is a very thick cake and you don't want it to brown too much or cook too long and become dry. So I'd rather cook it longer actually at a lower temperature so it stays nice and moist. This is going to bake on the center rack for between 60 to 75 minutes. Closer to the 75-minute mark is how long it takes in my oven, but every oven varies, so do keep an eye on it. At the about 65-minute mark, you can go in with a long wooden skewer and test it. If it comes out clean or with a few moist crumbs attached, it's ready. If it comes out with some batter on it still, you're going to want to cook it a little bit longer, maybe another 5 or 10 minutes. Once it comes out of the oven, you're going to want to release it very gently using a knife from the sides of the pan, so that way it releases easily. And you have to set this aside for about 40 minutes or an hour, so that way it can cool in the pan before you transfer it to your serving platter. But once it's nice and cool, or at least room temperature, then carefully invert it onto a cake stand or a serving platter, whatever your heart desires. And then you could serve it as is, dusted with some powdered sugar. But I like to take it up a notch, so I made a delicious cream cheese icing to go along with this, to go on top of it. And it's so simple to make. So I added 8 ounces of soft cream cheese to my mixing bowl, along with 1 cup of powdered sugar, a 1/4 cup of maple syrup, and then I went ahead and I mixed that all together until it was nice and smooth. And then I thinned it out with about 2 to 3 tablespoons of milk. You can thin it out to the consistency that you want. If you want a more thicker frosting, then leave the milk out altogether. If you want it to kind of be a little bit thinner and drip down the sides, add more milk so it can get to the consistency that you like. But if you're going to make this frosting while the cake is baking, transfer it to a bowl and cover it with some plastic wrap so it doesn't create like a layer on top. Like, it doesn't make like a hard layer on top. Let's decorate the cake and put it all together and do the taste test. Okay, so the pumpkin pecan bundt cake is ready and the house smells like fall. It just smells so good. All I did, I just took that icing and I just carefully spooned it over the top using a spoon. If you want to put it in a pastry bag that's fitted with maybe a star tip attachment, you could do that and just pipe it on top. You can thin it out, like I said, even more and let it drip down the sides and not be as thick. I'll leave it up to you, but I cannot wait to taste this. Wow. It's out of this world delicious. Probably the best pumpkin spice cake I've ever had. That pecan in there really gives it a little bit of a nutty flavor and gives it a little bit more of a hearty texture. It's so good. The cake is so moist it melts in your mouth. The cream cheese topping has a little bit of that maple flavor, so it goes so well with all those fall flavors that are in the cake, the pumpkin, the cinnamon, the cloves. It's delicious. I think you guys are going to love this one. Make some Greek coffee, call some friends over, and share this goodness. If you want to freeze this, say you're not using it all at once and you want to not waste it, right? You can slice this up, and once it's completely at room temperature, if you've iced it, then what you want to do is put it on a baking tray that's lined with parchment paper and freeze the slices so that way the icing sets. And then once it's set and hard, you can just transfer the slices in freezer-safe bags or a freezer-safe container, and it will keep fresh in your freezer for about a month. And just take the slices out. Once they come to room temperature, you could serve them, or you can toast them a little bit in the oven, not longer than like 3 or 4 minutes because you don't want them to dry out. It's so good. I hope you give this a try. If you want to print this recipe out, you can head on over to the website. Make this, share pictures with me on Instagram and Facebook. I love to see your recreations. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Gracias.